If the last 2 decades of Islamic immigration have taught us anything in the West, it's that tolerance is like salt. It's necessary and beneficial, but too much of it will kill you. We're forced to learn this lesson, it seems, after every violent Islamic atrocity, and we learned it again last week when a serving British soldier was murdered in the street by 2 Islamic barbarians, one of whom claimed that they were forced to do this terrible thing by the Quran, which he then quoted as justification. I couldn't help noticing that this very important and relevant piece of information was carefully left out of all the news reports, as if it really didn't matter. Instead, we were fed the usual blizzard of the usual platitudes from the usual suspects like the Muslim Council of Britain. But crucially, we heard no rejection by any Muslim of the Islamic scripturally mandated doctrine of violent armed jihad, which is the actual problem here. Islam endorses armed jihad. It is a religion of violence and terror. Allah says so, and everybody knows how Akbar he is because we hear about it whenever some innocent person is murdered in the name of his religion. We should not be expected to ignore the violence and hatred in Islamic teaching simply to avoid offending moderate Muslims. If they were really that moderate, they would face up to what their religion teaches and disown it. Instead, they prefer to dissemble and equivocate and say it's got nothing to do with Islam. But we can all read, and we know that's a lie, and that last week's murder was all about Islam from start to finish and from top to bottom. It was written right through it like a stick of seaside rock. ISLAM spells jihad. Oh, and by the way, please, no more garbage about jihad being a journey. It's a journey, all right, into mental illness, and we're not going along for the ride. If the British police were as quick to arrest Islamic bigots as they are ordinary citizens who post offensive messages on Twitter, this disgusting murder would never have happened. One of these savages was known to police and had already committed a prosecutable offence, but for reasons best known to themselves, they chose to ignore him until he committed this murder. Then we saw swift and decisive action as people were arrested for posting offensive, not libelous, offensive messages on Twitter, and an 85-year-old woman was arrested and held in police custody for shouting outside a mosque. In a just and sane society, the officers who made those arrests would themselves be arrested and charged with wasting police time. Meanwhile, media darling Andy Chowdhury is free to preach his message of hatred all day long while enjoying police protection as well as generous state benefits. He gets paid more for attacking and insulting our values than our soldiers get for defending them, and it's to our country's eternal shame that nobody is the least bit surprised. Of course, it's not just soldiers now who need to watch their backs in Britain, because these 2 savages also told us that nobody here is safe. We're all to blame, apparently, for their mental illness. We're all oppressors of Islam. We're all invaders and crusaders and God knows what else. But perish the thought that all Muslims should be to blame for the violence endorsed by their religion and repeatedly carried out in its name. No, they're not even to blame for the hate-stirring bigots who preach in their mosques without a murmur of protest. That's got nothing to do with them. Instead, anyone who points out the violent nature of Islamic teachings is automatically accused of stirring up hatred, when in fact they're responding to hatred that has already been well and truly stirred up, incubated, nurtured and fed by Islamic bigots in mosques and universities, and by the government and police's mealy-mouthed, multiculti cowardice and dishonesty in dealing with them. We can do something about universities, maybe, but only Muslims can affect what happens in mosques, because nobody else goes in there. If a mosque is allowing people to preach hatred and violence on its premises, then everyone who attends that mosque and who doesn't protest about it is culpable. I know very well that if I attended a meeting and somebody was advocating death to anyone from the platform, I would have plenty to say about it, and I wouldn't care how sacred the space was. We keep hearing about an anti-Muslim backlash in the wake of this atrocity, as if Muslims are somehow the real victims. They're not. What we need is a Muslim backlash, and we need it now. You may be a moderate, peaceful Muslim, but there's nothing moderate or peaceful about your religion, and you know it. The bigots who preach in your mosques, who take sustenance from your religion, are hiding behind you, and your silence is helping them to do it. If your mosque is letting anyone preach hatred and violence on its premises, you have a duty to call the police, and the police have a duty to take off their politically correct tinted glasses, to go into that mosque without removing their shoes and arrest that person. Anything less than this, and you're on the wrong side. And make no mistake, this is the moment to take sides and to show that you are taking sides. Loyalty to the Ummah is no longer an option, because these two murdering scumbags are part of the Ummah, along with all the other murdering scumbags that your religion produces by the thousand. And it is your religion that produces these people. They have not perverted it. They are following to the letter the Islamic doctrine of violent armed jihad. All you people who claim to speak for all Muslims, you self-appointed community leaders with your bland, empty platitudes and crocodile tears, you Muslim politicians and Muslim journalists in the liberal media who deal in evasion and excuses, this murder is on your shoulders, unless you personally and publicly reject the Islamic doctrine of armed jihad. No equivocation, no ifs, buts or maybes. We don't want to hear that this has nothing to do with Islam, because that's a brazen insult to our intelligence. We want a clear, categorical, public rejection of the Islamic doctrine of armed jihad. Anything less than this, and we will know once and for all that you are complicit, and that you are, and always have been, on the wrong side.